Joining me today is PFL light heavyweight champion Razor Rob Wilkinson, coming straight out of the frying pan into the fire, backing up his title win last year with a super fight of sorts opposite Thiago Santos on April 1st. Rob, we last spoke, before the title fight, mate? How's life changed between now and then?
Honestly, it hasn't changed too much. I'm just, straight back into training and same old, same old. But it is nice having that world title and that money in the bank account. So yeah.
Are you Mr. Big Time down in Tasmania yet with the $1 million in the bank and the world title strapped around your waist?
I was in the I was in the paper a fair bit. So my friends are making jokes that they had enough of seeing me in the paper and on the news. So, but it was good to have all that support back home in Tassie.
Yeah, 100%, mate, 100%. What did the celebrations look like after the fight?
Well, I had about maybe 25, 30 friends come over from Australia, and we just kind of organised this small pub to go to after the fights, and they said we can have a lock in there, and I think I stumbled home about 8 o'clock in the morning the next day. It's the first time I've stayed up all night for a very long time.
Oh, mate, that's an absolute solid effort, eh? Ridiculous.
It was.
It'd be rude not to ask if you've lashed out on anything big since you got the big prize check.
I've had that question a few times. I've been saying no, but I guess recently, I just got back to Denver like 5 weeks ago. And last year when I was here, I was just kind of renting and kind of borrowing and just fucking around with cars. But I went and bought myself a car and I got a Porsche Macan. So I guess I can say I splashed out.
Definitely a bit of a splash out there, mate. What were you doing before you got back to? Were you just in Australia for the time beforehand before you went back to Denver?
Yeah. So after the fight, we stayed in New York for a few days with my friends and went and watched some sport and did all that. And then Paris and my girlfriend, went to Mexico for 2 weeks, and then we flew back home. So I was home from December, like mid-December, until when did I fly back? Until like Feb. So I was home for like a month and a half. Yeah.
Are you finding it hard to get out of bed and go back to training with silk sheets and all that, or is that not an issue for you?
No, that's not an issue. I wouldn't want to get yelled at by Mark, the coach. So, my friends back home make fun of me because here I'm pretty much on time or early to training every time, every session. Where back home I'd always be late. But no, not at all. This is a huge fight for me, and I'm very excited about this one. It's definitely given me a lot of motivation.
Good to hear, mate. So you did. You mentioned Mark there. I just wanted to touch on Mark quickly. He's been given the all clear, hasn't he? In terms of his health
Yeah,
issues?
yeah. So so a couple of weeks. What was it? 2 or 3 weeks before my title fight, he went to hospital because he had a really bad staph infection. And when he was there, they said his kidneys weren't working, and they did a check on his kidney and found that he had a mass that ended up being cancer. And they said it was like a slow-growing mass in his kidney that had been there for a few years. So it's kind of lucky that he went in for something else and they found it. But he didn't want to get it. He couldn't get it taken out until the staph cleared up, but then he didn't want to get it taken out because they removed the whole kidney. He didn't want to get it taken out until the end of the year was done for all the fights, because he was like, "There's no way I'm not coming to your fight." And we had a few more boys fighting in the UFC in a couple of cards, so he's like, "There's no way I'm not going to those cards." So he got out of hospital on a Thursday night. Friday he flew to New York. 2 weeks before my fight for Chris Katikez's fight. He was fighting on the UFC card. Then he came over for my fight. Then he had, I think, 1 or 2 more, and then he got the surgery done. And he's, I think it was 4 or 6 weeks later, he was back training, running, and back at the gym. So it didn't slow him down much.
He doesn't stop that bloke, does he?
No.
I want to move on to the amount of coverage that you've got since you won the title, especially back in Australia. Now, when you won it, I personally anticipated it being pretty big news over here. I thought we'd get a few features, and we did get a few features here and there, but nowhere near as many as I expected. Traditional media have been a lot quieter on it than I expected as well. How do you feel about the amount of coverage that you've been receiving back in Australia?
I know in Australia, like, MMA is not the biggest sport, and as you said, like the normal, like the mainstream media often don't cover it at all. Same thing with Alex Volkanovski. I know when he's been defending his title, sometimes he doesn't, get much or barely, just a small little print in the paper or whatever it is. I guess I was happy with everything from Hobart, from Tassie. They covered me a fair bit, and that side of things was good. But I mean, it doesn't bother me. But yeah, it is what it is. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be crazy. I know MMA is not that big in Australia, and PFL is probably more like not well known compared to, say, the UFC. So I mean, yeah, it is what it is. It's I've still been doing a lot more interviews than I ever used to be doing, so it has changed like that. But yeah,
I mean, it's just from a personal standpoint, to see an Australian go over and win a world. I understand it's the PFL and it doesn't exactly have the same name value as the UFC, and I do want to touch on that as well. But to see the amount of coverage that we got when Volk moved up to 155 and didn't get the title compared to the amount of coverage we got when you went over to the PFL and won the title, I just thought there was a bit of a stark difference between those two personally.
Yeah.
Is there a level of frustration when you see some of the local lads who have just made it into the UFC getting a little bit more spotlight on them just because of that name value? I mean, obviously you're happy for them and all, but does that touch a nerve?
I don't really mind about that stuff. Like, I'm happy for especially all that Aussie guys fighting. They've been doing awesome in the UFC, and now we're having a few more Australians fight in the PFL this year as well. I think more what like frustrates me is just like people consider, like everyone in the UFC almost in the light heavyweight division above me in like the world rankings, which I don't believe at all. And that's what I'm excited about this fight as well, because he's the guy, Santos, coming off out of the UFC, and he was still ranked in the top 10. He's been fighting practically top 5 guys, for the last 5 years. So going out and fighting someone like that and beating him and making a statement and getting a good finish against someone like that, I think really kind of shows what level I am at, and that I believe I'm the best light heavyweight in the world, and that's what I kind of want to show this year. And definitely believe I should be in the rankings in that top 10.
100%, mate. All right, so we'll get on to Thiago. So you're a fan of Thiago's, judging based on what you just said, yeah? You've followed his career, obviously.
Yeah, I've watched him for a while. I think even when I was teetering with going up to light heavyweight after my hard weight cuts at middleweight, I was always, because it's a big jump, and I was always looking at guys, and he had just gone up and looking at guys like that, like knocking everyone out. I'm like, I want to fight some beast like that. But now I'm very different. I'm very excited to fight him, and I've been watching him for a long time.
So you kind of touched on it before. A win over Thiago Santos, I mean, that gets you, it's a big name on the resume and all that, right? What does it mean to you to have a win over someone like that?
As I said, I after winning the PFL belt last year, I kind of went home and wrote out some new goals and kind of challenged myself a bit more to having some bigger goals, besides being a world champion. And now my goal is to be recognised as the number one light heavyweight in the world, like regardless of what promotion that is in. And beating someone like Thiago is a good step for that, big step forward. Like, his last fight was against the current UFC champ Jamal Hill, and he was going okay in that fight, and I think he won a couple of rounds, and he ended up getting finished in the 4th. So I think if I can go out there and dominate and get a finish, and make it look easier than Jamal Hill did, it kind of shows, it's a good statement and shows what level I'm at.
Fair enough. Do you know how it all came about? Was this the plan all along when the PFL expressed interest in signing Thiago? Was the plan all along to have him set up the year with you first off?
I did actually hear that. So when they first announced that he signed with the PFL, some of the PFL crew were in Denver with me filming some pre-training stuff for the final. And one of the guys said he wants me to fight him straight up, because sometimes they hold back and they try and make it happen in the final, in the finals, and it doesn't work out that way. So he just wanted straight away have that fight happen. So I did have I wasn't sure, my manager and stuff were like, no way they'd do that fight straight away. But I did have a feeling that maybe it'd be Thiago straight away.
Yeah, here we are, straight up, mate. But they, yeah, definitely. I mean, it is tough when you've got the tournament season. As you said, you can hope and pray as much as you want, but it doesn't necessarily mean everything's going to line up and you get your two headliners essentially in the final. 39 now, Thiago is. The age is obviously going to be a bit of a talking point in the build-up. What's your current assessment of where he's at in his career?
I mean, I've been watching a few of his fights now, his last few fights, and yeah, I think he's on the way out. He doesn't look the same fighter as he used to, maybe like 5 years ago when he was coming up and fighting, and then fought John Jones for the belt. But that being said, like I'm not thinking he's old and out of it or anything like that. As we've seen, especially in the heavier divisions, light heavyweight division, some champs have been 40. What was 42 for Glover or 43 when he won the belt. So like you see some guys fighting well at that age, but not to do with his age, but just like looking at his performances, he doesn't look as dangerous, and his fights, I mean, haven't looked that exciting. He's kind of been on the back foot. Everyone's scared of his power, so people are still cautious. But I've been watching a few of his fights, and they've kind of just been like point fighting, a bit boring, not a lot of action. And I believe I'm just getting better. I believe I'm going into my prime. I think the next 5 years will be my best years, and I'm looking to make the most of that. And I heard he was saying that he thinks he's levels above everyone in the PFL, and I hope he thinks that, and I hope he thinks he's coming in for some easy fights and some an easy payday, because I'm happy to pay his spoil for that. It's going to be fun.
Is it a double-edged sword in a way, taking fights against aging veterans like this? I mean, obviously, still very dangerous, still a lot of skill, but on the opposite end, if you get the win, fans are pretty quick to blame a loss on age rather than a skill discrepancy. What's your take on that?
There's always, I mean, MMA fans are pretty brutal, and then you can never really keep them happy. But people are going to say, he's old, he was out of it, he was on his way out, or whatever they want to say. At the same time, I don't have a choice taking fights. I just fight. PFL, you fight whoever gets put in front of you. It's a tournament. You just have to take that fight if you want to be in it. As we said, he's a big name, and that's what I'm excited. He's still the biggest name, I think, in the light heavyweight division. So to take him out, I think, regardless of his age, does a lot for my career.
Who do you think's carrying more pressure into this fight? I mean, you obviously defending the title and him on a 4-fight skid or whatever it is now. There's a bit of pressure on both of you. Who do you think carries the most of it?
I mean, I don't mind the pressure. I assume for him, like coming off that many losses and then signing with a different promotion, that he wants to, he really wants to get a win here, and I'm sure he wants to win that world title that he never got over in the UFC before he retires. But we've seen a lot of UFC guys sign with the PFL, especially on their tail end of their careers, thinking they can come over and win a world title and make $1 million and have some easy fights, and it doesn't go well for many of them at all. So we've seen that time and time again, and that's what I'm going to show again on April 1st.
He's come out and said he expects fireworks. Is that about how it plays out in your mind, or have you got something else in mind, a bit of a smooth operator like you were playing last year?
I mean, I expect fireworks on my end. I don't know. I can see myself putting my way early with my pressure and just, my aggressiveness moving forward. Or, he's very tough. He's very experienced, and he's had a lot of 5-round fights. So whether it's working him and breaking him and trying to get him away within those 3 rounds, that is my goal.
So do you expect him to be in a similar form to what he has been on recently, or are you expecting something different when he debuts in the PFL, like a breath of fresh air almost?
I mean, it's hard to say. I'm not sure if he's gonna. I can only think he's going to be fighting like he has in his last maybe 5 fights or so. But maybe he's going to come out a little bit more aggressive and try and bring that old Thiago back into the cage. But I think once he starts feeling my power, he'll be doing what he has been in his last few fights and fighting on the back foot and just kind of looking for a big counter and trying to play it safe.
Fair enough, mate. And Look, is there anyone else? I know you said before that you don't really have a choice and you don't mind who you fight, but is there anyone in the tournament this season that's really piqued your interest that you wouldn't mind having a go with?
Same as last year. I'd love to fight Shoeface.
Yeah,
He won it. He won it the year before me, and he ended up getting injured. So in the semi-finals and didn't complete the season. I know he's not fighting the first round, but apparently he's going to be back in the second round. Maybe just give me both of the two top guys straight away, and then I'll have a cruisy finals.
love it, mate. Absolutely love it. We'll move on to the UFC light heavyweight division. You did touch on that just before, mate. It's been in a little bit of a shambles since John Jones vacated, with everything going around, a lot of moving pieces. What do you make of the current crop of 205 contenders over there?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting at the moment, and I think it's kind of anyone could win that belt at the moment. I think there's like a good chance for a lot of top guys and that top five to kind of have a fight and fight for the title. It's wide open. I don't see Jamal Hill defending it long. I don't know. I think he did well winning the belt and it was a good fight, but yeah, I think there's a lot of holes in his game where he will get outclassed by some of the other fighters. I know he's got a lot of power and he kind of carries that with him, but it's wide open at the moment.
How would you say you'd fare in that fight with Jamal Hill?
I mean, I'd love that fight with Jamal Hill. If UFC would ever do a promotion versus promotion fight, and I got to fight as a PFL champ against the UFC champ, I'd be very confident going into that fight.
Is that a harder fight or an easier fight than what you've experienced so far in the PFL, in your estimation?
Oh, definitely a harder fight. I think he's very tough. Like, don't get me wrong, all those guys are very good. Anyone in the top 10 in the world, they're going to be good. But I just see a lot of holes in his game, and I want those. That's the fights I want. I want those hard fights. I want those challenging fights. Like, as I said, I want to be considered the best fighter, best light heavyweight in the world. I'm not going to get there, and people aren't going to start talking about that if I'm not fighting good guys and beating good guys. So, that's why I was super excited when Thiago Santos signed with the PFL, because I thought, yes, that's a good guy, big name, top 10 guy in the UFC coming over that I can fight and beat, and then that's going to boost my career. So those are the fights I really want, and they excite me. I don't want to have easy fights. I've never wanted to have easy fights. I want to challenge myself and have the hardest fights there I can have. Yeah.
Last couple from me, mate, and I'll let you go on with the rest of your day. So Jones has had some recent success at 265 in the UFC, obviously. What are the chances we see Razor Rob Wilkinson making the jump up to 265 at some point in the future? Is it something you've even thought about after the move from 185 to 205 was so successful, right? Why not roll the dice again and go up? Is that something that's crossed your mind?
It only crosses my mind when I'm not allowed to eat burgers and stuff. The weight cut to 205 is very easy for me. So, that being said, I would like to have a heavyweight fight. I would like to say that I fought at heavyweight once in my career, just because I think it'd be fun. Maybe at the tail end when I can't be cutting weight anymore, or if it was, just another guy and we just kind of, whatever happened, agreed to fight at heavyweight, or for whatever short notice or whatever it was. I'd definitely like to do that, but I don't think it would be I say that as a joke. Sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should move up to heavyweight, and then I stand next to some of the heavyweights at the PFL, and they're like 6'7", and you're like, maybe not.
It's a bit of a difference there, eh? And look, last one, mate. When can we expect to see Rob Wilkinson and the PFL gracing Australian shores for a big homecoming fight? Is that something you've chatted to the PFL about?
After I won the belt, two of the main guys came up to me and said, we want to come to Australia. So I was excited. It doesn't sound like it's going to happen this year, but I think there are talks of potentially the first round. So like when it's still decent weather in Australia next year, then bringing it to Australia. So that would be unreal if I could fight in the PFL on home soil.
Absolutely fantastic. You don't think we'd get anything like the? I mean, Europe's a lot bigger than we are, but we won't get an Australian league down here like the European league that the PFL's done in over there.
I don't know. They're trying to branch out and be bigger and bigger. So who knows potentially? But yeah, as I said, it's good that we've seen a few more Australians fight on the Challenger Series, and I know like Shane Mitchell's, he's fighting at welterweight straight into the tournament. So yeah, it's exciting to have a few more Aussies on the card, and I mean, I think once they start maybe come to Australia, start kind of really building their name in Australia, maybe they'll want to do something like that.
Fingers crossed, mate. Cannot wait. All right, that was PFL light heavyweight champion Razor Rob Wilkinson. He fights on April 1st opposite Thiago Santos in the PFL, and that's on Stan in Australia. It's not on terrestrial TV over here yet, is it?
Yeah, I think Stan.
Yeah, just Stan. Wonderful, mate. Awesome. Thank you very much for your time, and can't wait to see you go on April 1st.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers, mate.